Say you'd run this time as a pragmatist. You would not. It wouldn't be, yes, we can, given certain conditions.
No, I think what I would say is, yes, we can, but it is not. But it is not going to. It's not going to happen overnight.
Get your bumper stickers now. That's President Obama with Jon Stewart yesterday, yucking it up, maybe not so much.
Doesn't have as much zing as that yes we can chant, of course. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
I'm Karen Travers.
Every day at noon Eastern, right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know in this home stretch. Twitter.com/Rick Klein, Twitter.com/Karen Travers. Karen, big night last night if you stayed up late, or even if you didn't, you heard about it today. What's on your mind?
Absolutely. Starting it off with heck of an interview. President Obama, of course, went on The Daily Show last night. It was an interview that was short on laughs, long on policy. The president didn't seem very comfortable, I thought, the entire time. Jon Stewart really, I thought, gave him some tough questions. This was definitely Jon Stewart representing that disenchanted, disgruntled, Democratic, liberal voter who's saying, where is everything that you promised us in 2008?
And clearly the White House wasn't expecting a love fest. That's not why you go on Jon Stewart. There's other forums for that, maybe fewer on the Democratic side than would be for a Republican president on the conservative side. But some of these clips, I think if you watch the whole interview, you got a different impression than if you saw some of these clips. When he says Larry Summers is doing a heck of a job, whoa. Yes. Not what you want to say as President of the United States.
Jon Stewart says, dude, you don't want to say that.
Dude, the first dude indeed. Next up, today's short list. Do you think 2012 isn't upon us already? Well, it turns out the Democratic National Committee has already filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Pentagon for 9 particular Republicans, all the correspondence that they've had going back more than 30 years in some cases. Mike Huckabee, Sarah Palin, Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, a lot of the people that you'd expect that they're looking in. But it gives a little window into the depth that gets plumbed by opposition researchers. DNC maybe didn't want this out there, though, before the election.
Absolutely. And I think you made an interesting point with this yesterday. Who's not on the list?
Yeah.
Mike Pence and Marco Rubio, both perhaps starting to lay the groundwork a little bit. Absolutely. Prostitution whores. Now, that is something that will be familiar to our viewers who are also viewers of the Real Housewives franchise, including the New Jersey one. But this is a very stunning ad out of Louisiana. Charlie Melanson going after David Vitter for that story, of course, that was in the headlines over the last year of money that he was paying for prostitutes. Let's take a look at that.
Our tax dollars paid David Vitter's salary, and he used it for prostitutes. You're welcome, Senator.
It doesn't get more blunt than that. Taxpayers paid for your prostitutes. That's a pretty strong charge there from Charlie Melanson.
Yes, and I think you can tell by how strong the charge is exactly where the state of the race is. You don't go there as bluntly as you do unless you're losing. But I feel like I should lift my laptop in case you're going to flip any tables.
I might.
Over.
I'm just going to toss the entire table, as the viewers know.
Exactly. And finally today, slamming Sarah. I know it's hard to keep up with the fashion trends when it comes to Sarah Palin, but suddenly it is in vogue to diss Sarah Palin, and this is actually a new development in the last couple of days. But we saw Karl Rove say that she doesn't have the gravitas to be president, and you add to that Charlie Crist, who's as far as you can get from Alaska all the way in Florida. Look who he's running against now in his race for Senate.
Down one road is extremism, where Roe versus Wade is overturned, and being a moderate is a curse. That's the road Sarah Palin, the Tea Party, and Marco Rubio want to take us down.
Yes, Marco Rubio and the Tea Partiers and Sarah Palin. A lot of candidates like to be part of the Sarah Palin thing. This is running against it, positioning against it in the closing hours.
To lump them all in that mighty triumvirate there to try and close the gap. And the polls are showing that perhaps he's actually gaining a little bit of ground down there in that three-way race.
Yeah, we'll see. But again, this is the kind of thing you don't say unless you're down.
Exactly.
At the very end. We're joined today by Simon Rosenberg, who is I'm sorry, your title with NDN. I'm forgetting. President of the New Democratic Network. Yeah. Simon, let's start with this news that we got from Jon Stewart last night. Jon Stewart obviously gave it tough to the president. How did he come off overall, do you think?
I think it's great the president went on. I think clearly this is part of the big offensive at the very end where the president is trying to reach out to the people that got him elected in 2008. I think this election still got life in it. So I think that what's important is the president's engaged. He's all over television. He's traveling all over the country. you know, I think, and what he recognizes that we don't know where we're going to be on Tuesday, and he can still influence what happens on the election.
What does Jon Stewart mean?
Jon Stewart's an important guy. You know, there's it's not just the show itself; it's the clips that run afterwards. I know that I watch him because I got little kids. I never stay up that late, but I watch all of his clips the next day when he's got political figures on. He speaks to a new generation of voters. He's trusted. He's an authentic communicator, and I think he's very influential. And I give the president a lot of credit for taking it on the chin a little bit and mixing it up with Jon Stewart last night.
As we were talking about earlier, it seemed like Jon Stewart was really that proxy for the Democratic voters who are just really unhappy. And there's a New York Times poll out today that said that the groups that perhaps pushed Obama over really supported Democrats, women, Catholics, independents, are now defecting to Republicans. Why is that happening right now?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the poll data right now, it's clear that the Republicans have sort of still tapped out in most polls at 45, 46, 47, which is where the vote they got in 2006 and 2008. The real movement has been away from the Democrats. The Democrats got 52, 53% in the last two elections. They're dropping down into the low 40s. And that's why the question will be in this final week is, can the Democrats reclaim what percentage of those voters they lost in from 2008, 2006 can they reclaim? And certainly the movement in the last few weeks in the Senate races and a lot of the governor's races has been towards the Democrats, right? They're closing strong. This is not a wave election. I mean, the wave crested in August. It's now some other election. And I think the Democrats have reasons to be optimistic that if they fight very hard in these last 5 days, they can pick up 2 or 3 points, which could make the difference between them winning or losing the House.
You think there's a chance they hold the House?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to let the voters make that decision.
No, but that's what, you have to say that. But
but seriously, if you look at the polling on this, right, it's, let's say the congressional generic is 4, 5, 6 points, somewhere in there. The New York Times had it at 6. According to Nate Silver, if it's 4 on election day, the Democrats hold the House, right? That's within statistical margin of error. That's within the statistical noise of this election. And what the movement at the end has been towards the Democrats, which means that this idea that late-breaking voters are going to break towards the Republicans, not in this election, right? This is not one of those situations where if you're a Democrat at 46, 47, you lose. Not in this election, right? You can still win this election, because most of the voters that are up for grabs are actually Democrats, not independents or Republicans.
One race where maybe we might see something that over the next couple of days, President Obama is going down to Charlottesville tomorrow to campaign for Tom Perriello. And this is coming down there, you took a couple tough votes for us, we're going to get your back. But there's a large young vote population down there with the University of Virginia. Perriello was down double digits a couple weeks ago. I think that race has closed a bit. But what has to happen then in the next 5 days? And can President Obama be the key to push him over?
He's going to do his best, and I think this is the whole point, is that you can never give up in politics, right? I mean, look at the Giants. I mean, somebody tweeted last night that, I wish the Democrats were more like the Giants, right? And
we don't want to talk baseball. Phillies and Yankees fans.
Hey, and I'm a Mets fan, so it's okay. It's okay. So we all hate the Phillies, I guess, right? But it's the Giants have shown that you're in this thing until the end, and I think this has been a highly unpredictable election year. Things are very volatile. There's been all sorts of questions about the likely voter polls. Do you know, if you look in the last 2 weeks, the gap between in the likely voter polls are 16 percentage points, right? Who knows where this election really is? So if you view it that way, the Democrats should be giving it their all and fighting for every ground they can, because I think the House really is close. The Senate clearly will probably stay Democrat, somewhere between 51 and 54 seats. Big difference, though, between 51 and 54, which is why they're fighting so hard.
And somewhere Nancy Pelosi is smiling with all the San Francisco Giants references and the comeback shift.
Maybe she should spend the last few days out of the games, right? With Gavin Newsom.
November 3rd. Let's give your scenario. Even if they hold the House and the Senate, which I think most Democrats would say is a cause for huge celebration, champagne corks, how do they change the way they govern? Or what should the White House be doing going forward, given the fact that even if they have control, it's going to be by an extraordinarily narrow margin?
Look, it's going to be a very different town no matter what happens next year, and I think it's going to be very contentious. I think the Republicans are going to have a very hard time, if they're in the majority, keeping their coalition together. It's a lot easier when you're in the opposition, because then you're united against a common enemy. The Republicans really, I think, are not really ready to come back to power. They don't have a big argument. Many of the arguments they made were kind of silly, frankly. There's incredible ideological division.
But if you're the White House, how do you change?
Yeah, and I think getting to that is that I think that what they're going to be facing is a very different city. And I would argue that Barack has to do one important thing, President Obama, is that he's got to learn from Reagan, that at the end of the day, the most powerful tool in the toolbox of the president is a big argument about where he wants to take the country. And I think that what we've seen is that Obama's argument, the sum hasn't been greater than the parts.
Right.
And this is part of what Jon Stewart was pushing him on last night, right? Which was, you know, you've done all these things, why don't we, and even Barack said at one point, I've done some things people didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, come on, you're the most powerful
Why
man in
not?
the world, why not?
Right.
Why not, right? So I think that the challenge for Obama now is to create a more compelling argument and to understand at the base what a presidency is about making a big argument to the American people. I don't think they've done a particularly good job at that, and I think they've got to raise their game in that aspect of the presidency.
All right. Simon Rosenberg from the New Democrat Network, the president of the New Democrat Network. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.